there was no better name for this podcast than Safe House. It just kind of serendipitously went perfectly with what we were trying to say.
Purim.
Close though.
And then at the end, this woman comes up to me and she introduces herself, asked me for my name, and she said, "Are you okay? You just look a little sad right now." And I said, "Yeah, fine, just I'm a little tired." And she said, "Okay, well, I'm happy you're here." And I was like,
The safe house. That's what did it right there.
That's awesome.
And then I took communion off a ping pong table.
There's no coincidences in God, and everything happens purposefully. And even when it's meant to harm you.
I think October or November.
Funny you don't know the exact date for that. I'm kidding.
So my name is Anna. I am Reggie's older sister, and I've known Dylan for 14 years, I think. A long time. And I'm really excited to be here. I lived in other parts of the state, and I lived out of state for a little bit, twice, and I'm happy to be back in the area and just be with family and friends.
Well, so, Anna.
Yes.
My sister. There was a lot of things, because I read through your testimony and I didn't know, and I was surprised about how did your faith grow through your life?
Yeah, so if I start at the beginning, you've already mentioned we grew up in a Christian home. It was never questioned what faith we were a part of, what we believed in. Mom and Dad talked about it all the time. You know, dinner time, we always got together and prayed, and it's very formal. The Lord's Prayer, so it's pretty formal.
He does it all the time now, and I'm like, Reggie, we don't do that anymore. I'm kidding.
Yeah, doing Awanas, Bible camps, church, Sunday school, VBS every year, like everything. You know, we were very inundated. Homeschooled, Christian homeschool groups, just a lot of it. So, in some ways, it kind of makes sense that after a while, I was like, I'm kind of good. Like, I feel like there's more to the world that I need to figure out. So, the whole works. I was baptized when I was 7. I didn't know what that meant. I was doing it because one of my friends was doing it. I said the Lord's Prayer. You know, I committed myself to God. I knew that it was a marriage with God, but I didn't fully understand that. I mean, how can you when you're 7, you know? And so it's fascinating to look back and say, yeah, I had a pretty strong Christian foundation. I had a lot of strong Christian influences, for sure. I knew that I needed to get out. I knew that I needed to see more of the world. And I don't exactly know why that is. I don't know where that stems from, but I knew I needed to get out. I knew that from the time I was in, I think, like junior high. I told Mom I want to go to a big college. I want to go away and go to a big college. And she didn't like that. So when I went to college, I realized how legalistic and pretty structured Christianity was presented to us. And I went through a pretty strong spell of not wanting anything to do with Christianity or God. And a lot of that is because I felt like, what's the point? You know, I follow these rules, and one of the beliefs I was taught was that God only died for those he had chosen. So if he didn't choose you, you know, you could do all the works. You could go to church, you could pray, you could be, you know, pretty consistent with your faith, but if he didn't choose you, he didn't choose you. And to me, I'm like, so then what's the point? You know, I'm not gonna...
Yeah, I'm not here for 50-50 odds.
Yeah, I'm not here for... Yeah, exactly. So I knew that I needed to, work on myself, and I wanted to figure out what I wanted out of life, not just the Christian values that I had pretty well inundated into my beliefs, but I wanted to kind of string out what was a Christian belief and what was a core belief. And so that led me to therapy. But I only went to therapy after Mom had died. And she died 2019. I didn't go to therapy really intensely until 2021 when my husband Nick and I moved out to Oklahoma City, where we didn't have any friends. My job was not that great. I was finishing up grad school. He was finishing up his school. So it was just us. You know, for fun, we would go to Costco on the weekends. That was our fun. I'm not even kidding. We would get so excited about Costco. Anyways, I started going to therapy because I recognized that I was having a lot of big emotions that I didn't know how to handle. And I thought, what do I do with these? I need tools, and I don't have any tools to know how to handle these. And so I started going to therapy, and I thought I knew enough about myself that I thought I had some traumas that I needed to address. I did a lot of trauma-based therapy, and I know both of you guys have done some therapy, if you feel comfortable talking about it. No, you haven't done any?
I haven't done
That's right.
No,
Okay.
you're just perfect, aren't you?
Yeah.
No, the only I mean, I did a bunch of family therapy as a kid. When my parents first got divorced, my mom kind of was like, okay, we all need to go to therapy. But all of it was just CBT, which is just, what is it?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
For everybody who doesn't know that, it's just talking. That's just, you talk about it, and normally you'll figure out, oh, that didn't make any sense. Like, why does my brain think this way? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But that's, like, really common therapy. But why don't you go into more detail? What kind of were the therapies you were going through?
Yeah, I did a bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And then I started trauma-based, and I did somatic therapy, which basically focuses on physical sensations and physical experiences associated with the trauma. So, and the thing about trauma-based therapy, I should preface, is that you are intentionally going back to those moments that were traumatic for you and trying to relive them as best you can. I mean, not as a third person looking back, you know, at the trauma. You're trying to relive it. You're trying to feel all of the emotions, the physical sensations, the thoughts that went through your head, or maybe the thoughts that went through your head afterwards, or you're trying to make sense of it. You're trying to relive all of it. And so it can feel very overwhelming, you know, depending on your capabilities and how much you can handle, and what the trauma was. It's pretty intense.
Is it supposed to make you feel like you're in a safe environment? Is that, like, kind of like the other half of it is like, yes, you're going through all these things, you're reliving it, but it's like, you're safe now. Is that
Yes.
kind of like the premise of it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's really important to find a therapist that you feel like you can really trust and that you feel safe with, because they're going to be the person that grounds you when you're going through that. And they're going to be the one that's going to say, you're okay, you're safe. If it's too much, we can back out. But point is to go through it again, because it's hard to fully work through something if you don't address all of it.
There's also parts of reliving moments that you forgot about or that come back to you.
And that's scary.
Gotcha, yeah.
Because your brain is so good at protecting you. And it's amazing what it can do and what it can't do. But it's so good at protecting you, and its objective is to protect you. And so when you go back in and you're reliving it, your brain's like, no, what are you doing? Don't do this. So yeah, and that's what can be super overwhelming.
Sure. Wow.
So I did somatic therapy, which is to relive it physically. And then I also did prolonged exposure therapy. That's where you are exposed to memories and situations, but the therapist reminds you that you're safe, you're okay. And then EMDR, which was really beneficial for me later on. It's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR.
Say that 3 times fast.
I don't think I could say one of those words that fast. It involves focusing on a disturbing memory while simultaneously engaging in bilateral stimulation, such as guided eye movements. So you're talking about, without getting into it too much, I'll just briefly explain it. You are focusing on a point of reference, and then you say what memory you want to go back and visit, or what event you want to re-experience. And you check in with your body, where you're feeling it, if it feels okay, if you feel relaxed.
Which is really crazy because I think my mom was sharing with me. But there's like, I'm not sure if this was your experience, but she felt it in different parts of her body. Which to me is insane that certain emotions do connect with certain parts of your body. Like, again, just goes back to how God created us. Like, it is insane the intricate details that he's done. And just like where people store trauma or pain in their body is like, that blew me away.
No, that was my experience. And so at different points of different memories, I would feel it in my neck. I would feel it in my shoulders or my stomach, or even, in my knees. They would get really tight or sweaty. My legs would be like all tense. And I didn't know why, but it's different. Your body is just trying to figure out, okay, where can I just shove this memory? Like, where can I store this emotion? And it literally puts it into a different part of your body. And so that's EMDR. And then written exposure therapy was where I had the most breakthrough early on. And Kelsey Eccles, she is just such a phenomenal therapist. I would still be going to her if she took people outside of Oklahoma City. She is so amazing. I will be thankful for her forever. She walked me through written exposure therapy. It's WET, the acronym. It's a structured therapy where you focus on a memory, experience, or event, and you write it out thoroughly, like in detail, your emotions, what you can remember, your sensations, everything for one of the therapy sessions. The next one, you talk about it. The next therapy session, you talk about it. Then the next therapy session, you write it out again, all over. You're trying to relive it and put it down on paper. And then you do that 3 or 4 times, or however many times you need to. And every time the story changes a little bit, and you add some more details, or you take some details away. It's really interesting how your brain works to, it figures out what is most important to talk about and what's most important to focus on in that session that you maybe weren't prepared for in the previous session. And so then it starts building on itself. And it's overwhelming, but it was really amazing to see the breakthrough that I had in terms of realizing how I struggled with relationships. And I through my therapy, I realized that I had a really hard time trusting people or wanting to become close to people, because in my childhood, I developed the core belief that people only want to be in your life if they have a motive, or you serve a purpose in their life. And it's not true, and I know that now, but I do still struggle with it. I believed that people only wanted a friendship with me because they had a motive behind it. Then I projected that onto God, and I believed that God wanted me to have him in my life because that the purpose of my life and to have God in my life was so that I would follow the rules. And if I didn't follow the rules and I wasn't, being a strict legalistic Christian girl, then God didn't have a purpose for me. He didn't want anything to do with me.
So was it more rooted in a fear of not having purpose?
It was more rooted in a fear of rejection. And that I was taught at a young age that if I'm not following all the rules or being a good Christian girl, that I my life was not valued.
I think that comes from many of the verses we were taught, that great verses, but sometimes it was taken out of context. Exactly. And it's like, Psalms 1, blessed is the man who walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. And like, we had to memorize that. Jason memorized that, our brother, at like 3 years old, which is great. It's a great passage, but sometimes it was like a little bit more along the lines of, if you're not righteous, you're not making it. You're going to go to hell.
Right.
Burn in the flame. But
God, you serve no purpose to God's kingdom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that was also coming from just the church, like you said, was very, like, you're chosen. If you're not chosen by God, then out,
Mm.
basically, which that gets into, we could talk about predestination and all of that and those things, but I'm curious, going back to Oklahoma City and your like, seems like when you were in that time, that space, it was very isolating, and you were able to focus on your healing and growing. How did that like create a space for you for your spiritual rediscovery?
It's a really good question. If I didn't go to therapy and I didn't explore these events that I needed to uncover, I had a lot of resentment towards Christianity and the church and God. And I needed to uncover things in my own past that were really what I was fighting against. It wasn't necessarily God. And so by uncovering the issues I had as a kid and even, throughout adulthood, I then was able to take a step back and realize that I'm fighting against God when that's not who my enemy is. That is not who I'm fighting the dumbest battle. So to answer your question, I needed to go to therapy in order to uncover what I was actually fighting against, in order to realize that there is space for God. I've just been filling it with resentment.
With like the wrong interpretation.
Yes.
Of what that looks like.
Yes.
Do you think was there anybody in your life that was a good model of what a relationship with God, like a healthy relationship with God, looked like?
It's a really good question. I don't know that there has been any adults that I've thought, that's how I want to model my relationship with God after. And I'm sure that's really disappointing for a lot of adults to hear.
They're like, oh, that Anna. We've been praying for her for so long.
I say that because there's not going to be one person's relationship with God that I'm going to be like, that's what I want. There's pieces of that relationship that I'm like, I want to approach him with that. And I like what that person's doing. And I like how they're talking to him. So there were pieces. I think I felt the most safe to be able to actually start really wrestling with questions about how angry I was, about how disappointed I was with God and religion, mostly religion, to be honest, with Nick. So he did a really beautiful job at listening, not answering, but pointing me in the direction and saying, yeah, I've struggled with that too, and this is what helped me, but it sounds like you might be struggling more with this. And it's not that Nick has all the answers, I don't have the answers, but he did provide such a safe, open space for me to say, I'm fed up. I don't really see the point. I don't really want to go to church, to be honest. It's dumb to me.
Gotcha. Kind of like, stop kidding yourself. Like,
yes.
This is how I'm feeling.
Yeah, he's like, I get it. I understand it's frustrating. It can definitely feel like you're just doing works, sometimes at church, and you're not plugged in and trying to be part of the body of church and trying to be the spirit of church, where you come together and you want to. And at that point in our lives, we didn't have the capacity to. This is before we moved to Oklahoma City. We were so busy, and he was working residency and just slammed. And then I was working and going to school. And so we just didn't make time. We didn't make time. And I don't really prioritize it. I don't see the point in it. So, and I'm okay with that. I think that's part of my story. Now, of course, I wish I had more time to be around other believers, but it was all part of my story.
Was there like a specific conversation where you and Nick had where you were like, what was that question that you're like, dude, I genuinely don't get it. Like, why are we still doing this? Like, you know, was there ever like a specific moment, or is there just kind of like a series of like, all right, Anna, like, what's your weekly question that we're like gonna go over, you know? Or was there just kind of like, was it just his like patience and kind of dedication to just like continuously be ready to answer your questions?
Yeah, I don't think it was one single question or conversation. It's a buildup, you know, and so often many of our decisions are an accumulation of what's happened in our past or what we're influenced by. And so, me being more and more disenchanted with the church had to do with everything leading up to that point in our lives. So, or in my life. But yeah, I definitely have like daily questions for him and like weekly questions. But it's a lot of conversation when we can have conversation or could have conversation. It was, you know, we still struggle with stuff and we still talk things out.
Was there like, what was probably like one of the biggest, I don't want to call it like a hang up, but that you just like, you could even still be struggling with it, like if you don't have an answer? I'm just more curious, like, what was that question? And maybe we can talk about them, just my viewpoint versus yours.
I think the biggest questions that contribute to a lot of the things that I struggle with are, why do we go to church consistently? Why do we memorize verses? I mean, besides the Bible saying all these things, we're not saved by those things. You know, we're not saved by works. But oftentimes they are like, the works are the pinnacle. That is salvation. And it's so aggravating to me. And I think it's because I didn't realize until recently how important having a relationship with God is, you know, or a friendship. I like to refer to it as a friendship more, because relationship seems kind of like, there's so many different types of relationships, but really God should be your number one friend. And I think that is completely missed and overlooked by so many churches. And that is so frustrating to me, and it's sad is what it is. It makes me sad, because I think people go their whole lives doing so many wonderful works, and they do have great intentions, and they are doing it for God, but they don't have a friendship with him. And it's like, I would, and you know what? I recognize that this is me trying to take on a God perspective of looking down at them from heaven above and being like, oh my gosh, you're doing so great, but you're missing me. You're missing me. And it makes me sad, because I would so much rather someone, and also my love language is quality time. So just sitting here and doing this, it's like, I love this. And that's exactly what God wants. And so to me, it makes me sad. And that's what makes me frustrated with, I think, religion as a whole, because they harp on so many to-dos, but they don't get to the relationship part. And I think part of it is because relationships are hard. And also, you can't, as a pastor, say, this is how you have a relationship with God. Here's start and finish. Now follow this roadmap. Every relationship is so different.
So true. It's interesting you mentioned that, because the message today from River City we just went to was Proverbs 13. A person thinks their way is right, but God weighs the heart. You know? And so it's like, I think you're kind of what you're getting at, essentially, or like one of the things that you're getting at essentially is, you know, it's so much more important to have the right heart posture, instead of trying to just keep doing the lists, the check marks every day, which is challenging. It's not like we're not supposed to do those things. Those are good. All of those things will help you be more fruitful, live a better life. So it's just having that grace, understanding that grace that God gives you. But
So obviously you're a mom now, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Seriously. But it made me think about it when you said, you know, you put yourself in God's position, which we're like, whoa.
I know, yeah. That's
But for me, that's literally what I do. Sometimes when I'm reading the Bible, like, I'm like, what the heck? Like, why is this happening? And then I'll try and put myself in God's position to try and get a better understanding of it. And obviously, you know my background, but putting myself as the parental figure has really helped me understand why God has done some things. So I'm curious for you, like, now that you are a mom, like, how has that kind of changed? Like, do you understand God a little bit more? Like, just looking down when you see your son, like, when you're trying to teach them or correct them, has that kind of shifted your perception of God?
Yeah. Thankfully, I haven't had to do a lot of teaching or correcting yet because he's only 6.5 months. But I realize that he could do the worst things. He could do the worst things imaginable and to man. And I would be like, dude, that's so heartbreaking. I am so sad by that. Like, I am devastated about it. But I still love you. You know, I will always love him. And it's truly overwhelming to me to think that that's exactly how God feels about me. It really, really is. And I've never been able to fully comprehend that or feel so overwhelmed by it until I've had him and I've realized what that's like. I also, a couple weeks ago, my pastor talked about how God wants to know every detail about your life. Everything. There's nothing too small to tell him. Even things that would bore Nick, you know, he wants to know. And I get that now, because if my kid was at school and he traded crackers with a friend, I'd be like, I want to know that. Tell me about it. Like, if he debated between, you know, I don't know, tying his left shoe or his right shoe, I'd be like, tell me why. Why are you debating that? God wants to know those tiny little insignificant, we think insignificant details about our lives. And so I've started just talking to him more when I'm driving or when I'm, you know, debating on, like, do I put the garlic in first or do I put the onions in first? I don't know. What do you think? Like, and it's silly stuff, but it is just such a small way to invite him, you know, and it's like trying to have a conversation. And I think hopefully some parents resonate with that, but I realize just how much he wants to be in our lives. And it's crazy. I've never been able to comprehend that before.
And it's so funny you say that, because when we prayed before we started, that's all I could think about when you were praying that. I was like, wow, she has so much reverence for God, and like, she's literally talking to God like a friend right now.
Yeah.
Because like when I did my short little prayer and Reggie did his, and then you just kept going, and I was like, it was just cool to me because you were praying like how I normally pray to God when it's just me and him. But the fact that you were like, it doesn't matter. Like, it didn't matter that we were in the room, that you were praying out loud. Like, you were still just talking to him with everything you were feeling going into this. And I was like, wow, like, she is totally unashamed to just be doing all that. And like, I kind of give, like, Reggie's heard me say the same prayer, like, I kind of just sugarcoat it. But when I was listening to you, I was like, wow, like, just to have that deep connection that you didn't care what the setting was to me, and literally just echoing literally that of just like, he does want to know every single detail. You go back to like just the rules that you talk about, and it's so funny like how we as humans love to just hyper fixate on the rules of the Bible. And I don't even like to call them rules. I'd much rather call them regulations, because to us, like you said with your kid, like, there's nothing you will do to stop loving. Like, they could do the worst thing, and that's how God sees all of us. And it's like, but these regulations, I mean, maybe I'm creating a slippery slope. God, these are just like the best possible way to live life, is if you follow these regulations. That doesn't mean there's not going to be pain in the world, because we live in an imperfect world. There's always going to be bad things that happen. We live in a world full of sin. But when we decide, God, I don't want to follow your regulations, you're inviting more bad things to happen. It's like God says, look, I can spell it out for you. Like, I'm sure you're going to do with your kid. Like, hey, you know, we don't hit people, or like, we don't bite. You know, bad things could happen from that. Like, you might get hit back. But it's just like, all you can try and do is try and tell them, hey, you shouldn't do these things, and here's why. I think it's when I've talked about this with a lot of people, like how I would imagine like raising my kids is like, I'll tell them why they shouldn't do things and hope that they don't. But ultimately, like, my kids are going to do whatever the heck they want. Just like with us in our relationship with God, like he said, hey, don't do these things. Okay, I didn't do them, and like, obviously there are good and bad consequences that happen with every choice. But I think that's why God, you know, gave us these regulations, is to be like, look, here's how I'd like you to live life. And it gives us so many different things that will happen when we don't live the way God calls us to. And it's still, he loves us that much that he gives us that free will to make those decisions. And so for me, that's helped me kind of take a step back from, like, obviously you guys struggled more with legalism, where I was like floating all around kind of doing whatever I wanted. But for me, like, I just see them as regulations of how I should live my life, not I have to live my life or I'm screwed. You know, I don't know if that helps.
I totally agree. I think, you know, also, like, the more you do continue a relationship with God, the more you want to, you know, live by those regulations as well.
It's kind of like in a relationship with a significant other, you do abide by specific rules, you know? And that's not because it's going to protect your relationship. So that's why you do it. It doesn't invite bad things to happen, like you're saying. If you stay steady with the things that you've agreed upon, then you're doing it in hopes that your relationship will grow strong and that you're closer together and that you have a mutual trust and that you can share with each other more and more and grow a vulnerability. And that's the same thing with God. We don't just follow these rules because we were told. We do them because we want to. We want to grow more with God. I want to learn how to depend on him more. I want to be more vulnerable with him. And so I think that's a similar strain of what you're talking about. Our pastor this morning actually talked about, we're going through Psalms and Proverbs too right now.
It's just a summer thing to do, I
Yeah.
guess.
Everybody should be doing Psalms and Proverbs. And he's talking about how, following these rules, regulations that you call them, it doesn't give us immunity from bad things. It protects our heart. It protects our motive for continuing our relationship with God or our friendship with God. And so I think a lot of people get frustrated. Some people get frustrated when they follow all the rules and then something bad happens to them. And they're like, why do bad things happen to good people? Doesn't mean that we're going to have immunity. It just means that God is going to protect our relationship, our hearts, and he wants us to learn how to trust in him more.
I forget, I have it written down somewhere, but it was like 2 weeks ago. Our pastor was saying a lot of people mistake Proverbs for promises.
Oh, yeah.
They think, if I follow all these Proverbs, like, life should be good. Because, yeah, Proverbs does get into a lot of, like, live this way and you'll find wealth. And that goes into a whole other thing of, like, wealth, God's wealth versus our wealth are so different.
Yeah.
Like, for me, wealth is like, like money. But for God, it could be like, no, your faith will be stronger. Or like you find that you'll get that family that you want or that job that you want, or just it could be a trillion different things. And we get so fixated on like, if I follow the letter of the law and I live my life this way, I'm going to get what I think I deserve. And God's like, no, like God stays true to his promise all the time. But if you're so fixated on like getting that new job because that's what you want so bad, you're going to totally miss what God's trying to bless you with.
Yeah, it's really wild. It's really wild. And I'll go for it.
I was just gonna, I kind of have a question of like, did you ever think God was against you, I guess?
Yeah, no. It's kind of like if you were to tell me about your friend Dylan, you tell me all about him, and I'd be like, oh, wow. And you tell me, yeah, if you want to be Dylan's friend, I mean, depending on the time in Dylan's life, what I would have to do to be Dylan's friend. I would be like, oh, wow, okay, so I have to follow all these regulations in order to be Dylan's friend. Okay, well, I believe Dylan exists. I just don't like the way, I don't like the way what I have to do to be his friend, And then when I do meet Dylan, I'm like, oh, we can have our own friendship. Like, oh, there's a different way to be Dylan's friend than what everyone else will describe how to be Dylan's friend.
That is so interesting, because I instantly, when you said that, I thought of like all the different people I know who are married, and everyone's marriage is different, And so it's like people trying to describe their own marriage, perfect marriage with God, is going to be the one that you're going to have.
Yeah, I always believed that God existed. I just didn't. I was annoyed with how everyone was describing how to be friends with God. And I was like, that sounds like a waste of time, And so I think one thing I want to mention is that I just didn't know how to pursue a relationship or a friendship in general. Like when I went into high school, I mean, I was homeschooled until high school. So like there's only so many social skills you can really get when you're homeschooled. And people have told me that I made a pretty seamless transition. But friendships were tough. They're tricky. You learn a lot when you're at lunch with a bunch of kids and at recess, and we didn't have that.
Yeah.
So I had to learn a lot about how to be friends, especially with girls, because,
Yeah.
I only had brothers. And so then I get into high school, and all the girls are so, you know, different than the few friends that I had. And it was really tricky to figure out how to navigate girl friendships. And they're wildly important, especially for women. And so figuring out how to navigate friendships, how to be a good friend throughout high school and college, and then how to be a good friend to Nick, to your spouse, that's a whole nother thing. But I have been trying to learn how to be a good friend on top of going to therapy, and all those things have been so helpful in applying it to my friendship with God, to my relationship with God.
So how would you describe your friendship relationship with God?
Yeah, it's slow growing, but it's like very genuine, very authentic. I feel much more comfortable now in my life when I talk to him than I ever had before. And I think part of that is because I've done so much work to uncover what I struggled with and what I was really angry with and what I was actually holding resentment against. And so now that I'm talking to God, it's coming from a place of genuinely wanting to be his friend and genuinely wanting to get to know him for him, not because of how other people have described him. Back to your point about my relationship with God and how it's changed since having a kid. I have realized since having him that how important it is to have God and a relationship with him but not just to show that I'm having a relationship and that I'm pursuing God and I'm learning about him and that I'm reading the scriptures and we're going to church and all those things. I want my kiddo to see the highs and lows of a friendship with God. I want him to hear the conversations between me and him, which is prayers usually, like saying, I don't understand why you decided that I don't understand why we would be sued right now. I don't get it. Why are you allowing this to happen? But you know what, God? It's out of my control, clearly. I can't control what other people do to us. I can control how I respond and what I do, and I can control how I move forward with our friendship and with our relationship and how I continue to approach you and this lawsuit, you know? And so I say that because I want to emphasize that I want my son to see the authenticity of having a relationship rather than just the performance of being a Christian. Because, to be honest, I've put on a performance of being a Christian my entire life.
Yeah, we're pretty good at that.
Pretty good at that. Do it in my sleep, to be honest.
Well, a lot of people are, you know? I think that's part of the struggle with going to church for people who don't have that relationship with God, but then they see these people who are performing, and it's like, oh, well, this looks fake, you know? And so that's such a huge problem, and I think that's something that kind of why also when you were earlier, you and Dylan both were like, oh, you know, the church calls it worldly people. Well, that's also the way it's described in the Bible, who don't know God, people don't know God, but it's like, in reality, I mean, we're all on this earth, we're all people, we all struggle with the same things, we're all human beings. So understanding that, it's like, you can try to be more authentic to those who don't have that relationship.
Yes, exactly. I don't want people to look at me and think, oh, she's a Christian because she puts on such a great performance and she knows how to speak the language of Christian. I want people to be like, wow, I really like her. There's a lot of genuinity about her, and I just appreciate that she wears her heart on her sleeve and that she talks about what she struggles with. And that's the kind of representation I want to be of my friendship with God, is I want people to know oh yeah, she goes through highs and lows with God, and she's very real about it, and there's no performance. She'll talk about it. Because again, I don't like the performance, and it's so off-putting. And then so many people feel that they can't put on the performance the same way, and they're like, why does this not feel quite right?
That's
I mean,
true. Yeah.
everyone's relationship is going to be different, right?
Yeah.
But
No, I can relate with a lot of that, especially just with like all the videos I post. Like I love not sugarcoating what I'm feeling, and so I'm sure like it's funny. Like even the video I posted today, obviously, like some of it, they're mainly just thoughts I have in my head. They don't quite address like the state I'm in with my relationship with God, but I realize, okay, I'm feeling this, and it's not a bad thing.
mm-hmm.
And I think God has gifted me in the ability to really express my emotions in a way that's relatable to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people also just don't have that voice.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what they're feeling. They don't know why they're feeling it. And then Christianity will tell you you shouldn't feel that way at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or even non-Christians will be like, yeah, they have this idea. Everybody has this idea of what a relationship with God looks like. So the biggest thing I've felt God has called me to do is to really air out the things I really struggle with and show how God has carried me through it. So even like recently, like the video I posted this morning was not very cheerful, but it shows how God has carried me through it. I feel like this tug, and I'm like, okay, I really want to speak on it. And the biggest thing I've always prayed for this podcast is that people would see the genuineness of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Like these aren't just conversations we're trying to have to get people to click through or buy into religion. Because that was a lot of things I struggled with, especially with people who know my story and everything I went through. Like even one of our best buddies, he's like, oh yeah, we're going to see him in like an insane asylum, like as a joke. Or just like, people were like, oh, you're just going through like religious psychosis, to like see how crazy of a flip my life had. To see that and to be like, no, all I can do is continue to pray for them and love on them. Just, okay, if I wanted to do something bad and like get revenge, that would go against everything that I stand for now.
Mm-hmm.
And just to really, that's been my biggest prayer, and like God has changed me in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But to really show that when people see me, they see God. They don't see me, they see everything He's done to change me. And like that's always been like the heart of this podcast, is just to have genuine conversations regardless of where it might go, to share the really ugly parts of the Christian religion or of a Christian relationship with God, because it's not all butterflies and rainbows. And I think that's so amazing that you're already starting with your newborn. Like obviously they don't understand the prayers you're saying, but to show like, yeah, that's not just the pretty, like it's also the ugly. Like with anybody, any relationship, like we all have our highs and lows. And I think that's like, I just want to applaud you for that. Like that's awesome. And it's definitely something I'll put in my parental toolbook or handbook.
I have a question for you. Do you think that through therapy you've been able to better articulate the struggles that you've had with God and Christianity? And I ask this because oftentimes I've found through my experience with therapy, it's given me so much language to put to how I'm feeling and what I'm going through and what's actually wrong. Do you think that therapy has helped you with that?
It's tricky. Reggie's always been my first therapist, to put it lightly. So, I was doing literally CBT therapy with Reggie. Like, that's how this got started, is literally just out on that back porch. And I've told him millions of times, like, the amount of times I would just come up here and I'd just start talking. And then I go, oh, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Or, like, he'd chime in, like, the amount of times he just sits and listens. And I'm like, he was just, like, that person that would, like, okay. Or he would help reframe my perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, oh, wait, you have no idea how much, like, this helps me. Like, I'll think of something, and then I'll start talking about it, and I realize how dumb that sounded. Or, like, wait, that wasn't right. Like,
so not to be, like, I've had a lot of practice, but I wouldn't say therapy for me was the reason that happened. Therapy for me, growing up, I had a super jaded outlook on it, just because it was more forced on me. So therapy to me, I was like, this is a joke. I was like, I don't, like, it just turned into a mind game for me. Like, how can I tell them what they want to hear and, like, I can get in and out. But that all changed with my situation, and just, like, when everything happened, I knew I was in such bad shape, and I was like, how the heck do I get out of this? And to me, it was therapy. And for me, it was just, like, with my therapist, like you said, it was so important to find a therapist you felt safe with. And for me, like, that was a total God thing with the therapist I found. Like, literally the first one I find, she ends up you know, I talk about religion, and she felt comfortable enough to tell me she was a believer as well, which was just crazy, absolutely insane. That when I'm starting to entertain this, that was just a total God thing. But like the biggest thing that she told me that just helped me when I was going through like my absolute worst of the worst is she's like, just do these 4 things. She's like, go outside for 15 minutes a day, eat 3 meals a day, drink water, and I think like exercise for like 5 minutes. She's like, just focus on those 4 things, because like I couldn't even be a person, like I would just lay in bed, and she's literally just focus on those 4 things. And it was just getting in the routine of starting that something small that like that was the first thing that really started. And like she must have like absolutely loved it, because she didn't have to like talk at all during any of our sessions. Like she just like would listen to me, and then she would kind of just like reaffirm everything I was already kind of believing, or like just help me like remap, okay, like that's not 100% truth. So I would say like it all just goes to the years and years of talking to Reggie up here and just like other people. Like that's how I get out of my funk, is I just talk about it, and I realize where my faults are with my logic, and that's how therapy has kind of worked for me. It's just the remapping of my perspectives is how I put it. So I wouldn't necessarily pinpoint it exactly to therapy doing it. I think it was just, you know, God always keeping Reggie in like this safe environment for me. That's what has allowed me to always verbalizing my emotions, or what I'm feeling, how I'm feeling it, and why I'm feeling it. I think the why is super important, because a lot of people will know what they're feeling and how to name the emotion, but then they get hung up on, I don't know why I'm feeling this, and that can create a lot of anxiety of like, okay, I'm super mad about this, or I'm super anxious, or I'm super sad, but I don't know why. Why don't I know why? Like it's my body, I should know why. So I think the why is super important, and that's something I feel God has enabled me to explain why I'm feeling it, in the hopes that other people might be able to relate to a piece of it, because everybody's different, but they can pull a piece of why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, and that can help them start to piece together why they're feeling.
Yeah, I realized after I asked that you don't have a problem talking. So finding the words to describe how you're feeling isn't the same same problem that I had.
No. But there were times, like, I think that's something God is also, is just, I'm not afraid to be vulnerable either. Like, I remember when I was talking with Reggie and Josh when I first went through everything, they're like, it's so weird to hear how vulnerable you are. Especially, like, as a guy, like, why are you able to talk about your emotions the way you are? Like, that's weird. Like, it's pushed on us, you know, just society, like, be a man, figure it out, don't talk about it, you know, your emotions are weakness. Which, funny, reading yours, like, that's a lot of what you struggle with. Not, okay, that was, yeah, but.
No, yeah, it's what a lot of, yeah.
Growing up, obviously, with, like, not a lot of other female role models or just relationships, to see how, like, yeah, you struggle with emotions. It's just, like, our dads are very similar, but that was just the environment they grew up in. Yeah. And so because they are our parents, that's the environment they're going to raise us in. But yeah, great question.
To piggyback off of that, the being able to express how I felt, any of us, it wasn't really a thing.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was more, you know, it's interesting because I think you have to be careful with your emotions, obviously, like, and your feelings, and they can get out of control, and, you know, you have to realize that even if you don't feel God's presence, God is always there, and sometimes that might be, you don't feel his presence because he's letting you go through something that you need to go through so that you can become stronger, or he can see how you're going to handle that situation. I think it's important with emotions to, like, they're valuable, not decrease the value of them. And, like, yesterday, the episode that we did, the whole reason, like, she knew God was real is because she felt God. And so that was huge to me, because it's like, I've never been told that growing, like, you know, raised as a Christian, like, it's feelings are kind of a slippery slope. Like, too much emotion, too much passion, and it can cause you to stumble and fall. But then at the same time, it's like, it's what got David to have the courage to kill Goliath. And he had that heart, he had that emotion and the passion. He reveals himself through that emotion and that presence. So, like, for us growing up, it's kind of more important to shut that, like, control your emotions. Like, that was what we were trained to do. was control, which is good, but
To
it can
avoid it?
also lead to, like, for me, well, that emotion is pointless. I don't feel good, like, I don't like that, I'm not gonna feel that, like, I'm gonna just go on, yeah, not express that. But you do that for so long, and then it also takes away other areas, drive and passion that you should have, motivation.
Yes. And we mentioned earlier how emotions are stored in the body somewhere. Because even though we were able to control it and suppress it, our body was storing it somewhere. A really good book about it is called The Body Keeps the Score. It's a little heavy academically in the beginning. Have you read it?
I mean, I know of it, and
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. It helped me understand so much about emotions because, we weren't taught how to deal with our emotions, and we were kind of taught to just get them under control, follow the rules, check the boxes, basically. And I have had some stuff happen, physically, and then after doing therapy, I'm like, oh, wow, I feel so much better. It's my emotion was stored there,
Yeah.
And it sounds weird to people who are first hearing that, but it's legitimate, and you can do a lot of research about it, and it's true. Sure.
But so something we just started doing is we have our previous guests ask a question for you, and you'll have the opportunity to answer it. But then after that, you will be leaving the question for our next guest. So the question for you is, it's a two-header, but it's, what are you struggling with as a Christian today, and what are you doing to help combat that?
It's a little bit about what we talked about earlier. I kind of mentioned it. There's so many things I struggle with, to be honest. The more I think about this question, the more I realize it's not something I struggle with in regards to religion. It's something that I personally struggle with. It really makes me really sad and upset that people die on these legalistic hills, and they miss the point of God being about love and a relationship. And there's a lot in there regarding that. I think I struggle with how people perceive my relationship with God to be, and the trajectory that it's on, and that they may not be okay with that, and that they're uncomfortable with it. I struggle with letting that be okay. I think I feel the need to justify and seek validation from them that I am doing the right thing. I don't need their validation. If I'm doing what I know is right and true, I don't need their validation. But I recognize that I struggle with that. I took a class recently about recovering from invalidation, and the instructor said, if you live for someone's acceptance, you will die with their rejection. Why am I trying so hard to get something from someone when I don't have to? I don't need that. So that's something that I'm struggling with, and how I'm combating it, I'm talking about it. I'm looking for the answers.
Well, I'd say even the class, like,
Yeah.
if you didn't know it was an issue, like, you wouldn't have taken the class.
Right. And I think the more I talk about things that I'm struggling with, the more likely you're going to find the answer.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's awesome. So now for the fun part is, what would you like your question to be?
When you're the person sitting in the wheelchair, when you're old someday, who do you want to be? And what does your life look like now to become that person? What do you want to strive towards when you're old? That's my question.
All right, guys, that is going to wrap it up for episode 9. Thank you guys so much for your support and always watching. As always, please make sure to subscribe and just share this with anybody that might need an encouraging word. This is the Safe House Podcast.